the meeting of the Board of Registrars on May 15th, 13th. We'll begin. You want to go, Kari?
Okay, thank you. We are meeting to discuss the safety and feasibility of conducting the June 11th rescheduled annual town election. Let me start by telling you what the numbers are for absentee and early ballot applications. We received 442 absentee and 103 early ballot applications. This is as of a few days ago. Since the town manager's robocall to all residents, inviting them to apply for early ballots, we have seen a huge uptick in applications, mostly by email. So we're working hard to fill those, and we expect those numbers to increase rapidly. So one thing that to remind voters of is that when they submit their request, we need their signature on the request, as well as their names, their dates of birth, their voting address, and where to mail the ballot. If we don't get the signature, we send a copy of the email, but it's a lot easier for our paperwork to just get the original request with the signature on it. And that can be done as simply as putting the information on a piece of paper, taking a picture with your phone, and then emailing that request to us. And that takes care of it. So last year, sorry?
Excuse me, email to whom?
Thank you, to the town clerk at concordma.gov.
Okay.
So we still, of course, have to have polls open on election day. And we have to focus on the health and safety of voters and election workers. I've heard back from many election workers who are not actually available to work for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, we're pushing for early and absentee voting by mail. The turnout last year for the election, where there was one contested race, was a little over 1,400 voters. So this year we have both school committee and select board as contested races. So we may have higher numbers than that. One option to look at ensuring the safety of voters and workers is to limit polling hours. So there's just less time for exposure. But we also have to think about sanitizing the voting booths. And that needs to be done after any voter uses the voting booth. So another option to think about is to consolidate all the precincts into one polling location. I reached out to the superintendent of schools, and Dr. Hunter has said it would be okay to use an air-conditioned gymnasium where we could set up 5 polling stations. We don't expect that we're going to have a lot of people coming in, so I don't think that we'll have a lot of crowding, but we don't really know at this point. If we do change the polling locations, if we do recommend it, it's something that the select board would vote on, and it's something that we then would have to send a notice out to every voter that's affected to let them know that for this election, there is a different polling location. That's also an opportunity to further encourage early voting by mail.
Kari, if I may, what gymnasium did Dr. Hunter suggest?
I am waiting to hear more detail about that. So I've reached out to Jared Stanton to see what gym would be available.
Mm-hmm. Considering parking and access and handicap access and
absolutely
all those things.
And air conditioning, because June 11th can be
June
a lot
11th.
of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or heat. What's the deadline for early voting?
The deadline to apply for an absentee or early ballot is noon the day before the election. However, the deadline for us to receive the ballots back is 8 p.m. on election day.
Oh.
So it really is further back than that. So we would need to get the application in enough time to mail out the ballots. Obviously, the ballots have to be mailed. They can be mailed back, or they can be placed in our drop box, which is located at the side entrance to the townhouse building. Looks like a mailbox, but it does say lockbox, and we are already seeing that people are using that.
Kari, I have a question. Is this idea about the one location consolidation based on your response from the poll workers that do not want to be there? Is it going to cut down on personnel?
It's going to cut down on personnel. There is also, we are also able to ask the Secretary of State to approve lower, less people working at the polls.
Right, less
than
staff.
we normally are required to have. So we could have, thank you, we could have less staffing at the polls. This would certainly allow us to have better oversight if all of the activities are happening. But my bigger concern is the voting booths and how to keep those sanitized. And if we have them in one location, it's easier to have one person directed at doing that, rather than looking at, who is going to be doing that at 4 different locations.
Exactly. Does the town have any liability in this situation?
Well, the law requires that we hold an election. So,
but in this day and age of COVID-19, I'm just wondering.
I don't know.
Yeah. Coupled maybe with the reduction in hours, one location, continuous sanitation of a more consolidated set of voting booths.
Will you have more people gathered in one place then? Could you conceivably be waiting in line for a while to vote?
Well, again, it depends on how many people are actually willing to go and vote in person or interested in voting in person. So we would have the social distancing parameters marked, and we would have very clear direction on, where the different, where people would go. I don't know whether it would be handing them a colored number so that they know which precinct they go to at the entrance as they enter, and then they would go and check in. So there's as little contact as possible. There's also, plexiglass shields that we would have for election workers, and of course, personal protective equipment. And then voters would be given face masks if they don't come in with them. They would also be given a ballot marking pen that they would keep, so that we're minimizing what we're having people, possibly cross-contaminate.
Okay, so you would get to whatever gym, and then it would be marked where precinct 1 people vote and where precinct 2 people vote?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So sort of like the old Harvey Wheeler setup.
Yes, except it would be in one open space. So that also encourages ventilation, better ventilation.
Yeah. How about any chairs in case the senior citizens can't stand in line?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or younger.
Yeah. I will say we've had, usually we'll have less than 100 absentee ballots for a turnout for a town election. So we're already seeing that more than the average number of absentees. And as I said, I expect the early ballot applications to increase. So there will still be work at the polling locations because the absentee and early ballots are still checked in, checked out, and fed through the machines. But we just don't have the added contact of more voters coming in.
Yeah.
So Wendy, you think limited hours and consolidation,
Well,
or are you saying one or the other?
I don't know. I mean, if we're expecting perhaps a low turnout, and maybe you could watch the data for the absentee and early voting as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be worth people sitting there from 7 to 7, especially the wardens who are on duty most all day, to maybe reduce everybody's exposure that is giving their time at the polling place, even though it may be fewer people? But each precinct will still have a warden, I would assume, because
Yes.
they have to bring us the tallies. But if reduced hours meant less exposure to everybody, whether it's the voter or the people working there, if we're going to have only 1,400 people show up, it's a small election. It's not like our Super Tuesday. It's just maybe those things could be combined. It might also be determined by the polling place, because depending on the availability of parking and access, which could slow voters down getting in. They don't want to. The other thing to consider is people vote after work and before work. So you have to,
Right,
there's a lot of
depending
things
on how people are working at that point.
That's right. And most people are, at that point, we don't know.
Right.
But it's got to be, kind of a fine balance. And I know in the workplace, my sister's trying to, her company, EMD Serrano, they are trying to stagger people back to work, and it keeps getting pushed back on the days from June 1st to June 15th to June 21st or something like that. So we don't know where people will be in the workforce, never mind, trying to get into vote.
Right. One thing I was thinking about, the benefit of the limiting hours is certainly less exposure, but there's also a risk of the social distancing. You have more people coming in a shorter amount of time as opposed to spacing it out. But because some people do tend to come at specific hours. Some people like mornings, some people like afternoons more. And we can, if we have fewer people working at the polls, and I don't honestly expect that we'd have more than a few people at a time for each precinct, then we could have election workers working smaller shifts.
Okay.
If we were able, if we have enough of them to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
We could start later than 7, though. Chop it off.
Start later than 7, you say, Joanna?
Yeah.
In here. Okay.
Probably won't be a lot of people working by then, even.
That's true.
Oh,
there I am.
But again, you don't want to be in the position of denying people the opportunity to vote.
Right. Well, if we send a notice out, if we decide to consolidate the precincts, or if the select board votes to consolidate precincts, then we can include that additional information in a postcard mailing as well.
Okay. So what's your feeling? What's your sense?
As far as should we vote? Should we make a recommendation?
Well, do you think you have enough information to make a decision about one place to vote? Is there any information you can give us that you haven't already? You know?
No, I am waiting to hear back on the location, so I don't know exactly which location would be available, but it would have to be accessible. It would have to be air conditioned, and it would have to be big enough. So it would Ripley Building, which is one of the polling places, doesn't have air conditioning,
No.
and it's also not big enough for
Yeah.
five ballot boxes and five tables to be set up at enough of a distance that voters aren't confused as to which, they came from one check-in, where's the checkout table, where, so we definitely have to map it out. But I think that's a technicality. I think that's absolutely doable. And a lot of clerks across the state are doing this. They are consolidating polling locations.
Kari, Helen's on the
Yes.
call now. Should we bring her
Oh.
just a quick
Please.
update?
Sorry, I lost my phone. It fell out of my bike. So I've been trying to find it.
Oh no.
I went for a bike ride and I'm like, wow, I don't hear my phone chirping. And then I pulled over and it fell out somewhere. I don't know where, but
Oh, that's great that you got
Is
it
there,
back.
I don't have it. I don't know where it is.
Oh no.
Whatever. It's fine.
So let me bring you up to speed, Helen. We've got 442 absentee and 103 early ballot applications that have come in already
Yeah.
for the June 11th election. And now we're talking about, since the town manager's robocall to residents about early ballot applications and early voting by mail, we're getting a lot more requests. So now we're talking about further ensuring the health and safety of voters and election workers, and whether that's by limiting polling hours and or consolidating the precincts to one polling location, or any other ideas.
I wouldn't consolidate, because then it's going to be a line down to God knows where with all the space you're going to have to provide between people. I just can see that line going out the door out to God knows where, because some of them are more heavily populated. I would encourage as many absentee ballots as possible. Is there a way to do that?
Yes, we had the town manager did do a robocall for early ballot applications, because early voting by mail is allowed now.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more requests. I'm finding that a lot of election workers are not able to work at this election,
Yeah.
and also considering the need to continually sanitize the voting booths.
Mhm.
So the benefit of consolidating polling locations is more control over things like that, the sanitizing, and just maintaining the health and safety of the poll workers.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe we need new poll workers.
I don't know how many voters actually want to show up in person to vote on election day.
Yeah.
So last year we had 1,400 voters come for a contested election. This year we have two contested seats on the ballot. So we're a third of the way there with absentee and early ballots. We're a month away from the election.
Less than.
I think we can encourage more voting by mail.
I know. Well, what do other places do?
Well, a lot of clerks are looking at consolidating polling locations.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you'll, I'm thinking it would maybe you give each, you know, wherever you're supposed to vote, maybe there's one day for that. And then there's one day for the other one, you know, like do it that way. Would that make sense? And that way you don't need to have a whole bunch of people spread out everywhere. This might be a better way to control the flow, you know, and do it in the high school where there's plenty of room, you know, set something up like that rather than these little whatever hodgepodge places we all go to, and do it in the gym. Like, it's just, there's so much more space. And then that's what I would do.
And in
Would
fact,
we be
actually, Dr. Hunter has said that it's okay to use one of the gyms for consolidated voting.
I would do that. And I'd tell them what day they come and just do this is the day you get
Well,
to
it's
vote.
June 11th. I mean, everyone's the same day.
Yeah.
But given the circumstances, I think people have to be flexible and realize that we have this many polling places but we want to do it this way. So that everybody's safe and nobody can complain and you don't have to find a million people because you don't have the luxury of getting all these people that will work. They don't want to work and they don't want to, you know, so it just kind of eases, I think it eases things a little bit. I don't know. What do you think, you guys? Wendy, Joanne?
And we talked about reduced hours. I think a critical part of the decision is to know which gym it would be for logistics. The access for handicap and the access for parking would be important too. If we can't split the vote by precinct by day, because it has to be all June 11th, we'd really have to have a commitment as to how many people are willing to actually work at these polls. And they might have to have an understanding of what's provided by the town in terms of PPE, plexiglass, and all of that, to put them at comfort levels as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Helen, I guess voters would also receive a mask and things.
That's right. Voters would receive a
If they don't
face
come.
mask if they don't have one, and a marking pen that they take with
Their
them.
own pen. It's I don't know. I'm thinking, you know, the air conditioned gym, I mean, the high school makes the most sense. It's the biggest.
Yeah.
You know, a
I
lot
have
of these
reached out to
elementary
the principal there.
And
What's the handicapped accessibility
Oh, it's
for
completely
the high
accessible.
school?
It's completely
Sure
accessible.
they have it. It's a brand new school, so I'm sure they're compliant with every single.
But isn't it a long walk from where you park to get in? I don't know. I don't know where the gym is actually. Oh, I do. We've had town meeting there,
yes,
right?
I mean, it's on the first floor. So
Yeah.
you park from the BD Center, you enter through that area, the cafeteria is where you check in, and the gymnasium's
Yeah.
to your right.
Right. But it is a lot of walk.
Yeah, but that's sort of going to have to be a compromise. We're not going to get it perfect. You know,
It's
keep
gonna
people
be-
apart. That's the bottom line, social distancing. So,
And town meeting is held there, so it's a known location. I mean, people of all abilities go
Yeah.
to town meeting.
I think
Well, I think consolidation sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think so too.
Wendy?
I think so too. I think it cuts out the variables And as registrars, we can't be on site, running to each polling place all day. And if there's issues at one, and not at another, at least it'll be one place. I think it's just clarifying and for each precinct, when they get there and where to go, but that should be able to be handled, whether it's color coding or, whatever.
Yeah.
But, it'll probably be almost like when they just let so many people in, like to Trader Joe's.
That's right. Right.
That kind of an idea. So I think it's the way to go. And it seems like, I don't know if Dr. Hunter comes through with the high school, which probably seems like the most reasonable, that, it's a known entity to so many people. They may feel comfortable with that. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be big, like we're going to have to bus people from Ripley to a town meeting type of thing.
And this is just a guess on my part, but I don't think we're going to be overwhelmed. It's not like a federal or even state.
Right.
Not to say the town is not important. It is.
Absolutely.
Good point, Joanne.
Thank you.
So Kari would,
So then,
excuse me, Joanne. I was just going to
nothing.
ask, if people, as you see the absentee ballots and early voting creep up, would that drive your staffing numbers eventually, do you think?
At the polls, it doesn't matter whether people show up in person or we
Right.
have absentee ballots to process.
Right, they all have to go to the poll, but
Right.
yeah. So,
So I think it's hours that have to.
Bad internet connection.
Yeah.
A lot to be said for being in the same room.
That's bad. I don't know why. I can't really hear. Joanne, had you just said something?
Yeah, I think we need to determine the hours.
Okay. I think the state has
Are we
prescribed.
agreed? We agreed consolidation?
Yes. High school
Yes.
consolidation.
Yeah.
So can I make a motion that we recommend to the select board that we consolidate voting for the June 11th election to an air-conditioned gymnasium
Yes.
like the high school?
Yes.
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 And then I guess we need a second.
I
I
second.
second that. Oops, lost everybody.
There you are. We see your name. There you are.
Now you're back.
Okay, so
Nice to see you again.
You too.
So since I'm generally the one taking minutes, I'll take the roll because we're meeting virtually. We have to do a roll call vote. So I will take the roll. Joanne, how are you voting?
Yes, I'm
Joanne?
voting in favor of.
Okay. Helen,
I'm voting in favor of as well.
Wendy,
I'm voting in favor of as well.
and me, Kari, voting in favor. Thank you. Okay, and then the hours, and I have to look at, sorry, I don't have this right with me.
I think in years past, we had a somewhat later opening date time, later than 7.
I think you're right, but that was for uncontested elections.
Okay.
20. Excellent.
Okay, so for local elections, state law requires that the polls must be open no later than 12 and must be open for a minimum of 4 hours. But the risk again is that limiting hours can result in overcrowding, especially if we're going to be in one location.
Yeah.
Maybe we
Right.
should have something like they do at the grocery stores where the older crowd comes early. We can somehow suggest that. Is that possible?
You can always suggest that. I don't think we can turn anyone away
Right.
on election day. But
Just out of courtesy, try to let, you know, I think that older people are going to have, you know, more
Why did the old folks have to come
half the town.
just because Stop and Shop wants them to?
How does it look at Stop and Shop in the morning, Joanne?
I have no idea.
I mean, is it worth the attempt to try to encourage some courtesy to half the town? Joanna, you're the
Would you have to show your license or your birth certificate?
No, we'll
Prove that you're an older.
Do you think it's worth doing or just no? I mean, we know that people
No.
get up early and vote. Some people.
I think we should have regular
People get
polling
up early
hours if
and
we're in
vote,
one
but they
location.
go into work.
Yeah, no one's going to work.
All right, this is kind of off topic, but it just made me think of something. This isn't a gigantic election, but what about candidate supporters at the polling places with signs and so forth?
Mhm.
Like,
Well, there's a 150-foot electioneering line
right, okay,
from the voting entrance, regardless of where the voting is taking place.
yes, okay.
Yeah, I think we should have full polling hours if we're consolidating the location. Just so that people who are used to and want to vote at a certain hour, they still have the opportunity, and we're less likely to have a lot of people in one place, you know, at any given time, because we have stretched out the hours so much.
I agree with that. So the hours would be what, 7 to 8?
Yeah, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Plus, we have to process all of the absentee and early ballots, so that's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
And the polls have to be open in order to do that.
Right.
Right. But that can be done during the day, right?
It has to be done
When
while the
it's
polls are open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready to decide on the hours?
I think as long, yes. I would do 8 to 8. Does that sound horrible?
You mean
doesn't,
just
but I
knock
think
off an
people are
hour?
used to 7 to 8.
7 to 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think people are used to that.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I mean, I love the idea of 8 to 8, but I think,
I just thought it could
know,
give us a
it's-
little extra hour to be ready for sure. I don't know.
yeah.
What time do the workers have to
True.
get there?
6. Why are you laughing, Joanne?
I bet they would
I'm
mind
kidding.
an hour later.
Okay, so then 8 to 8.
I prefer 7 to 8.
7 to 8. Okay.
Yeah.
So then let's just keep the hours as they are.
Okay,
Okay,
second
That's
that.
normal
Wendy?
polling hours.
that's fine.
Okay, Wendy, okay?
Yes.
So I don't think we have to vote on that because that's the normal polling hours that
Right.
we have.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Thank you. Thank you all for your input.
You're welcome. Is that it?
Now, that's all we have on the agenda. I do want to, if I may, Chair, if I may mention that we received email correspondence from Judy Zonbrecker from the League about supporting the Safe Elections Act. I've only just sent that email to you all, so we haven't had time to review this, but I think it is worth discussing at a future meeting. So we probably should meet soon because this has to do with the fall elections. And this affects extending early voting for both the primary and the state election, and also potentially or proposes mailing out absentee ballots, I think, to all voters. So there's a link in the email that I sent out, which I'll also post online, to the House bill that is worth looking at. And maybe we can meet in another week or two to talk about that and see how election planning is going.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Great.
Somebody want to speak?
Somebody wants to speak. Judy? Is it? Kari?
Hi, Judy Zombrecker, Border Road. I'm actually speaking as a poll worker, and something that I encourage the town clerk and the Board of Registrars to consider. I work at typically the Harvey Wheeler Center, where we have 2 precincts.
Mhm.
I would say 25 to 30% of the people coming in do not know what precinct they are in.
Mhm.
And even when there's a map provided, most of us do not know how to read a map, how to locate where we live. And so that was my experience, certainly this past election and in previous elections. As we think about where a pinch point will most likely be for a single polling place with 5 precincts, I would suggest that you carefully think about that as being your primary pinch point, your primary spot where people will have difficulty social distancing because someone's going to need to be there to help them identify that. People can identify the polling place by going to the Secretary of the Commonwealth website, putting in their address and getting that information. But that's one way of doing it. But I highly encourage that you consider how to address that issue, because it'll be a much greater issue when you have all 5 precincts now going to one spot. There will be an enormous number of people who will not know where to go to vote, even within that one spot.
Thank you, Judy. That might be an opportunity to have something like greeters or poll pads or something where we can actually look up the voter information and then give them their precinct number so that they can go in and go right to their polling place, right to the right precinct. That's a really good point.
Good point.
Yeah.
Judy. Thank you.
I think you mentioned this before, Kari, if each precinct was identified by a particular color, and if you're going to precinct 3, you get a little piece of paper that matches that so they can, you know what I mean? Match up.
Yes, yes, yep. Yeah, with a
Or just a
precinct
paper
number
with a
and
number
color.
on it.
Yep,
Yeah.
I like that, okay. Yes. Okay. Good
And
idea.
is this something that the registrars can do? Can we actively work like that?
Yes, actually, you can't handle ballots, but
Right.
you can help at the polls, yeah. You could help in that way,
Okay.
absolutely.
I'll go early, and since I'm amongst the aged.
Oh, we have someone else who wants to speak. Joanne.
Hi, I'm Carlin Reed. I'm also going to be a poll worker. And I was wondering, Kari, do you have an idea of how many people have said yes to working June 11 so far?
I don't have the final numbers. I've just seen, yeah. So it's probably, I've heard from about 20 who have said they can't. I haven't heard from everyone yet. So I don't know exactly the number of yeses.
Does that include wardens?
Yes.
There'll be a learning curve then.
Yeah, well, wardens and clerks are trained together. So
Okay.
yeah, we have a lot of good people.
So you'll have a training session before June 11?
I will have a Zoom meeting with election workers just to talk about how things will work. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do have voter registration deadline is June 1st for the rescheduled election. So we will be here until 8 p.m. though I don't know if people can come in person to register to vote at that point, but at least we've got the lockbox and we can take calls. And people, of course, can register to vote online and by mail. I think that's all I have.
Then I guess we can declare the meeting over.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Kari.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kari.